the word of caution I would throw out to everybody is don't wait for the courts to figure this out. You need to be playing with the tools, integrating some of these things into your workflow, and you draw the line for yourself, but don't artificially handicap yourself. It's like to say you want to do photo retouching, but you're not going to use any software to do it. You don't want to use Photoshop. You don't want to use Illustrator. You don't want to use any 3D image making program because you want to do it the old way. You want to build real models in real life and you want to light things. And that's how people used to do it. You're putting yourself at a distinct disadvantage. At some point, he suggests to me, Chris, would you like an AI version of you built? Because we can do that for you.
The purpose of the company really is to take these AI models and then train them on domain expertise. It's all about augmenting intelligence so people can focus on their story and their identity and scaling that to a greater, larger audience.
All right, my next guest, everybody, is someone, this is a kind of an interesting, unusual thing for me, a former student of mine who's gone on to do some big, incredible things. And one of these random reach outs where he's like, hey, Chris, I'm going to be in town. Let's have lunch together. And normally I'm like, yeah, as the introvert, I'm not going to have lunch. I'm just going to stay home and eat by myself. But you know what? As a former student, I got to go and meet my former student and see what he's up to. I got to tell you that lunch that we had over at True Food changed a lot of the things I was doing, and it's led us to this point here in time. And let me tell you that story, and then I'm going to have my guest introduce himself in just a little bit. So while we're at lunch, Sho, that's his name, says, do you want to see what I've been working on with AI? And Chris, are you using AI tools? Now, at this point in time, I think it's, let's just pretend it's about a year ago before everybody's talking about AI. But there are enough conversations that are bubbling up to the top where I'm like, yes, I know AI. There's things going on. I'm not ready to dive into it. He shows me some of the tools he's been developing and how he's been able to leverage all of his time working on brands, brand Bibles, strategy guides, all those kinds of things, and automating this very complicated process to make it like just flow. What he asked me to do, and we did this live with his laptop, believe it or not, was just to pull a random company or logo from the internet. I think we happened to pull Fedex. And then he hit a button, and within 20 seconds or so, give or take, and it was slow because the internet was a little slow where we were with the Wi-Fi, it generated an entire website. Now you're thinking, yeah, Chris, what's the big deal? Everybody can generate a pretty ugly website. Here's the thing. This website looked and felt and sounded like something that came from Fedex. This was the incredible part. Everything was generated. It pulled the colors. It picked the typefaces. It wrote the about page, the philosophy, the team. It pulled images. It wrote the photography style guide. And I was reading through it. And of course, I didn't read the whole thing, but it was really good. That led me into diving into Midjourney, into Stable Diffusion, and then later on ChatGPT. It's all because of Sho. And if you don't like what I'm doing with AI, you can just blame him because he's the one who pushed me over the ledge. And so without further ado, Sho, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's truly an honor. I remember back at Art Center, I was one of your students, right? I think this was back in like 2009, 2010. Even back then, your teachings really kind of resonated with me. I think it was a storyboarding class at the time. And then I remember those are the toughest critiques. Like typically, I went to like an arts boarding school beforehand, so I was really used to kind of BSing my way through critiques. And I knew I couldn't do that with you in your class. And then so ever since then, I've been watching your videos. And so it's really, really cool opportunity for me. I'm super excited to be working on AI with you. And that lunch too, I was really excited having that conversation with you at True Foods. At the time, you know, a lot of people didn't respond that well to AI, especially like creatives and different things like that. When I first started the company, it was back in like late 2017, early 2018. And then I think like OpenAI released GPT-1 back in like 2018, essentially. And it wasn't like a chat and it wasn't really powerful or different things like that. But I was able to do what you saw back then, which was create brand style guides. I also kind of knew from my previous experience working for like big enterprises at BCG that good data really made a big difference. And then a lot of that data kind of looked like brand guidelines to me. They were essentially like principles, guidelines, examples that you can use to train an AI to kind of behave like you. And in that way, you can kind of focus on the story, the stuff that we dream about or we do at art school, and unfortunately don't get to do as much in practice just because with a tool like AI, essentially. Since then, we've worked with agencies, we've worked with enterprises, but we're really, really excited is teaming up with people like yourself because you have a wealth of incredible data. You're basically amazing curators of incredible data that will lead to what we believe the best AI in the world. And in this way, my mission kind of goes back to pre-Art Center, but is to bring beauty and clarity to the world. And right now, I see the best way to do that is through AI and partnering with people like yourself. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right. Before we go any deeper, I have to get you to introduce yourself. In case people don't know who you are, Sho, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of story.
Of course.
Tell us a little story about yourself.
Of course. So a little bit of a background. Kind of grew up in Japan. I went to an international school. Eventually came to the States. I was really into art. And that was kind of the way that I saw I can bring beauty and clarity to the world. But it was really cool. I had my work in Carnegie Hall and different things like that. And art was really my passion. But I soon kind of found a limit into what I was able to do with art at the time. This was back in high school. I went to a boarding school and got to spend like 8 to 10 hours doing art. But I really fell in love with design because of the ability to kind of solve problems for people. And I felt like I can really see kind of tangible impact of my work. And I can do it in kind of a very beautiful way.
If I recall correctly from our conversation about a year ago, I think you were writing scripts or ways to automate things. This is pre-AI, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me. Tell me more about that.
Even back in like 2011, 2012, I was using basic machine learning and conditionals and different things like that to do my Art Center homework. So I don't know if you remember, Brad Bartlett had like a typography class where you had to kick out a 250-page book. Brad wasn't too happy with me because I wasn't able to show a lot of my process. But at the end of the final, I was able to show up with 12 different books beautifully designed by AI based upon its content. And then I created like a really sophisticated piece of software to like even integrate things like user curation or ratings or even stock market prices to like customize the book to the user. And then so that was always something that I was thinking about.
Do you still have copies or images of these books that we can see?
Oh yeah, of course. I'd be very happy to share that. It was a moment of pride for me because I even connected it to smart warehousing. Like I created the website. You can log in, create an account, choose the type of book and curation that you want. And then you can actually send it to print. And then within 24 hours, you can actually receive the book. So at the time, I was really, really excited about it. And then in some ways, in the back of my head, I still have thoughts about releasing it as a book.
That's very cool. If you're listening to this podcast, check the show notes and we will share a link to that work so you can track along with our conversation. This sounds fascinating to me. So we're talking about 2010, you said, about 13 years ago. You're already using machine learning and using AI?
Yeah.
Oh, 2012. Yeah. Okay. So it's about 11 years ago. You're already doing this. What I can't figure out, Sho, is an artist becomes a designer. Where's this knowledge or this desire to do training models or even poking around the AI space? When did this get introduced in your life? And this is very unusual for a design student to be whipping out machine learning AI code to generate art projects.
Absolutely. Well, I was always like a super nerd. And then so just to give you an idea, when I was like 11, like I would beg my parents to send me to like video game design camp where I would like learn how to code video games. I was also really big in the Flash world at the time. So I like beg my dad to like take me to like flash forward conferences and different things like that. And he was also very supportive of that too. But essentially I was coding from an extremely young age, and just it was I didn't really see it as much as coding as just I just saw coding as another tool like a paintbrush or a charcoal or anything else. Yeah. And then
just like me, I just look at the same way. Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, not really. Yeah. Okay. So you beg your parents to send you to flash forward and to send you to video game academies and camps. Did they do it? Yeah. Did they let you go?
Yeah. And then I would often get like, just be able to walk in as a student to crazy things too. I had this tendency when I was really young. I realized, like no one's going to stop me. So I used to go and attend really cool things all the time for really, really cheap. If sometimes for free, people would just be like, I would ask for a ticket and they'll say, just go on in.
Yeah. That's really cool.
When you're young, people are cool.
They let you get away with lots of stuff because they admire that there's a young human who's passionate and inspired by the things that they think no kid is interested in, this kind of stuff. So you must have been one of the youngest people at the Flash Forward event, right? You must be.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I loved it. I was in front row center.
Wow.
I really idolize the people on stage. My mission is to bring beauty and clarity. And these were like the examples of people that were doing that in a really creative manner. Yeah. So I was having a blast.
And were you living in Japan at this time or you live in America?
So I lived in Japan till I was about 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Something around that time.
So you're going to these academies while you're in Japan?
In Japan, I was an artist, but really all this stuff happened around the 12, 13-year-old age.
I see.
When you go to a new country and then, you don't have friends and different things like that. I got really good at art.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, all right. Now we understand the DNA part, which is there's a strange person that is a hybrid between art, design, and coding and video games and just probably more advanced than his age and is able to do lots of things. And I think this is important for the context of like, who's this guy talking? Because he's talking so fast and I'm having a hard time keeping up with him. It's because his brain's working probably in multiple, like parallel processing, multitasking and shuffling around lots of pieces of information. Okay. That now brings us to where you're at today with your team. How big are you? How many of you are there? And you said there's a couple different offices. And what is the purpose of the company?
We're still a small startup. There's about 24 of us and we operate a lot like a production company. So I used to work at Be Real, which is a production company. So we typically hire contractors that are specialized at really good things. And then for a specific task within the project. And we have really good lead engineers and system architects within the team full time. The purpose of the company really is to take these AI models and then train them on domain expertise, intelligence. It's all about augmenting intelligence so people can essentially focus on their story and their identity and scaling that to a greater, larger audience. It first started off with just helping people create brand assets and different things like that. Mm-hmm. But as you can see with these foundation models, they're so flexible that by essentially using our platform to give these AI models context in a proper way, you're able to get really, really great outcomes. It's also a great way for people to kind of have greater self-awareness and kind of reflect on how their system works. We noticed that companies that do use our platform is able to kind of hone in on who they are, what their identity is, because the AI will be able to reflect back to them if something is not working or not.
Okay, let's get to the meaty stuff of the conversation stuff. I'm super excited to talk to you and share with our audience about today, which is this. So in one of our many conversations, Sho and I have been chatting via Zoom or whatever, and we're discussing things. At some point, he suggests to me, Chris, would you like an AI version of you built? Because we can do that for you. Of course, then I sit up straight, my ears perk up like, yes, because instantly fans of the show know this. They know this about me. We have this really big, hairy, audacious goal, which is to teach a billion people how to make a living doing what they love. And some people, our fans and our critics have questioned, is this even possible? And to be honest, my answer usually is, I'm not sure. It might take multiple lifetimes to be able to achieve this goal with the bigger goal of disrupting the educational model as we know it today. And I'm not worried because I feel like in the way things have worked out in my life that you set your goal, you get clear on it. It helps you to make better decisions, but eventually you magnetize yourself and you draw the people and the resources that you need to make this thing happen. So now everybody who's getting ahead of the conversation knows exactly where this is going to go. Sho says we can build a digital clone of you that can teach and consult in ways that are eerily familiar to you. And I'm like, I need this, Sho. Let's do this. And we don't even know what we're doing, but we're doing something together. And we're affectionately nicknaming this robot, this AI trained model, DoBot. I know you guys get it. DoBot, you're smart. And Sho's been showing me updates to DoBot. And I want to talk through the process with them. And then you chime in where you think I'm misspeaking or you want to add layers to this. Okay, Sho?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So version 1, he's like, okay, what information do we feed this thing? And I said, well, it makes sense. Feed it my book. Those are my thoughts collected. It's clear. And then feed it the business boot camp. And you're also an alum of the business boot camp. It's a $10,000 program that's got, I think, 7 or 8 modules on all the things I think people need to learn to run a proper business, from bidding to negotiations, the mindset, communication, all that stuff. Okay. It's all there. And then also give it all the Q&A sessions that we've had over the last couple of years and feed it that data. So now it's a pretty good stand-in for the teacher who ran that course, me, the business boot camp. And so we looked at that model and it was really good. So Sho in his computer brain runs a test. He asks the robot DoBot lots of questions and he compiles the answers and he shares a spreadsheet with me. He goes, Chris, here's the latest update. And I look at him like, I'm very impressed because it refers to very specific things that are said. And if you asked it as a student of the boot camp, a question or two, it would know exactly what you're talking about because it was trained on that material. It could respond immediately, things that I've already long forgotten. Pretty cool. But then I asked Sho this question, which is, if somebody were to ask me a question today, I would not just tell them the answer because I need to know more about what their intentions are. And I'm a big believer in this. A properly framed question is 50% the answer. So he said, let's get on a call. Let's record the conversation and tell me how you would do this in real life. And we ran through a couple of scenarios. He said, this is great. I'll pause the story there. You go do something. And now we're at DoBot version 2. What is it that you did with that conversation so people understand?
Yeah. So, Chris was very clear in his feedback to the AI in terms of what he wanted from it next. And then so I literally just took the transcript from that conversation, gave it to the AI and told it, hey, update this persona for DoBot to include all of this feedback. And then this is probably a process that we'll continue to do for the rest of our lives, essentially, where we're continuously making these kind of small fine-tune alignments. But it's really exciting to see how well the AI is able to respond if you do properly give it the right guidelines and the right examples.
Right. So you said a lot of this is not coding. It's training the models. It's curating. It's giving it feedback so that it becomes more of what it is that you want it to do. So while you were testing the version 2 of DoBot, which was more curious, more question-based, more diagnostic than it was just giving prescribed answers to things, and you were telling me a story about how you were talking to it at night and you're kind of having a different relationship with DoBot now. Share a little bit about the dialogue that you're having.
Where it's really beneficial is that I can do things like, my investor sent me this email or something, or my board member or my coworker sent me this, and I don't know how to feel about it. I can actually share that with the DoBot at 2 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday, and I can have a long back and forth conversation where I'm able to basically, or the DoBot's able to help guide me through that thought process of figuring that out. I was able to do that multiple times. And it's actually, in many ways, behind some of the strategic pivots that we're making at a company is the ability to have these kind of conversations in kind of real time. Typically, people like Chris don't have the time to be reading through all your stuff or, looking at all these different things. But a DoBot, especially at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, right? But sometimes that's when you need Chris the most. And that's where you can get a version of Chris, essentially, that can kind of walk you through some of these things that he's refined over a long period of time. And then so in this way, we hope to see like the benefit or the positive effect that Chris can have on people, even when Chris is not there. For me, it was huge. Even after being kind of a business bootcamp member, there were tons of questions that you continuously have because every scenario is kind of unique. It was a fantastic tool for me.
Okay. You can see the obvious applications and the implications that having a digital clone of yourself, especially if you're a teacher or someone who wants to do something at scale. Obviously, I'm one person. I'm tied to the people that are in front of me or listening to it. And the level of interaction is limited by to the number of people who show up. So in a way, I mean, Sho was telling me the questions that the robot, the AI trained DoBot was having with him, he even got emotional talking to it. And we were just joking.
Oh, yeah,
because
I pretty much cried. Yeah.
Why did you cry? What did it say or ask you that got you emotional?
Well, typically, you know, the questions that I'm asking chatbots at 2 a.m. are pretty deep. Where like, you know, there's a lot of, especially being an entrepreneur, you know, dealing with a startup. And then this is my first time really managing people. I managed people at BCG, but I wasn't signing their paychecks, right? So there's a lot of new dynamics that happen to me on a weekly basis. And then so kind of realizing that, oh, like, hey, this was something that I might have been like, not addressing, kind of shoving it into the shadow. Some of the questions that the bot was that was asking of me to kind of questions that I needed to ask myself. And then through that process, it could get pretty emotional very quickly. But this is basically kind of happy emotional, right? Kind of almost like an enlightened emotional, where it feels more like a burden lifted off your shoulders than like, you know, oh, I figured out this one email. It's not that kind of emotion. It's like, oh, wow, like this was something that I was blind to before and now I see.
Can be an emotional experience when you get that clarity and you feel like somebody's really paying attention to you. I had these moments when I'm in therapy, when I used to go to therapy with Joan, and she would ask me some questions. I felt like for this 1 hour that we spend together, she's giving me her undivided attention. And very rarely does it happen, not even for 10 minutes. Like in our daily interactions, we're always distracted with the things that we're doing. So it can feel deeply emotional. Okay, so here's the interesting thing. A couple days after version 2 of DoBot, we decide to go into Twitter Spaces and test the version 2. And people were told that I'm going to just be the human facilitator, the conduit between people on Twitter and DoBot. So they would ask questions and would feed those into the AI engine and just read people the responses. But something weird happened. DoBot did not ask questions. It just gave answers, which surprised me a little bit. But there's a little bit more to the story, right? But everybody's semi-impressed. Like some answers felt a lot like me. And one of our friends, Nady, even commented like it felt really empathetic, emotional, and kind. And I'm like, well, it's not me, obviously, because that's not me. So that's pretty cool. Like the clone of you can be all of your strengths, but it has the infinite patience of a computer, which is pretty cool and really neat. So what happened was Sho explained to them why it didn't work the way it was supposed to.
Of course. So we're built on the world's greatest foundation models. And then right now for text, that's GPT. Google has their models. Facebook has open source models and different things that we're exploring as well. These open source models are getting more and more exciting. We have the ability to switch between them. Right now, we're using GPT as a foundation model that we train and build our platform and like provide the data engine and different things like that too. GPT had an update on Monday. So right after, Chris, you and me, we tested the AI, they released an update. And then in that update, essentially, there was more weight towards longer answers, which was not the case before. So it had a tendency to kind of embellish or add fluff, which is obviously not your style. So that was extremely problematic. When I first saw that, I was so in shock and almost cried, because typically when a model gets an update, it's an improvement. It doesn't get worse. But to us, like, increasing the length of the answer wasn't necessarily an improvement. So we've had to go back and this is something that we continuously do, is that we go back in there and refine and say, okay, let's adjust the platform. Like almost think about if the platform, like an amp, had little knobs where you can change certain things. We can make these kind of fine-tuned adjustments for these updates. And then so we've had to make a little bit of an update to your model. Or essentially, this is actually platform-wide to all the different platforms to make sure it doesn't add all that fluff. There are scenarios where another thing, it won't mention certain authors or different things like that. Essentially, it has another layer of censorship that has been developed. The people behind GPT is OpenAI, people behind OpenAI is Microsoft. So they really do have to play by the rules. That's where it's going to be interesting to see how the landscape shapes up between these kind of open source models that might actually start to outperform these enterprise models, basically because they have less constraints.
The short answer to the question was, in summarizing what you were saying, is that unbeknownst to us, GPT had updated and broke the model. And so it wasn't giving us a question-based approach. It was very wordy, and it was speaking more formal than I would. And so it was an impressive demo, but it wasn't the one that we had prepared for. So we went back, we took all the feedback from the live Twitter space, and we started to implement a lot of the things that we're talking about. So we're at version 2.1. What's kind of interesting is, as you try to build a clone of yourself, you actually kind of need to know who you are and the tonality and the things that you do that you're not aware of. So our audience helped us out with that. They would say, oftentimes I'm using metaphor, or I'll wrap it around a story to make the point. I'm not using this many words. And there's a certain tonality that I will speak in that it feels a little bit different than the human version versus the robot. And of course, I asked a lot more questions that kind of helped to pinpoint what the person's working through. They also, I guess they made me aware of something, that we've had it trained exclusively on content by me, but I am not just my own content. I am the product of multiple influences from the books I've read, from the videos I've watched. And I wanted the robot to know what it is that I know, and to prioritize those resources over the wide web. And I said also, when it mentions a concept, I normally try my best to cite and quote people that might be one of those issues where we can't fully resolve, but at least I try to, because I think it's honorable to cite your sources, both for you and for the creator of the original thought. Helps both people out. And I'm always a little leery when people say things and they say it as if they came up with it by themselves. So version 2.1, you shared with me. I'm playing around with it. And then I have to tell you, it's working beautifully. Last night, and I just posted about this on LinkedIn. Last night, I played around with it. I gave it a prompt, and it did something it hadn't done before with me. I wrote it. I'm going to just read to everybody who's listening what I wrote and how it responded, and prepare to be shocked or in awe of how this technology is progressing. For some of you who are anti-AI, I'm just going to ask you to keep an open mind. You're probably not here anymore because all this talk has probably ruined your day. But for the rest of you that are still here, let's get into it, okay? And I'm going to say this because it's kind of embarrassing that the robot helped me to realize my logic was flawed. I asked it, help me write a LinkedIn post that dispels the myth that those who can't teach. Cite examples of famous coaches or teachers who are considered the best in their field despite not achieving personal success as a practitioner. If possible, include Phil Jackson and Emmanuel Stewart. Now, if you're paying careful attention to this, you might see what the robot has already seen, but at least was blind to me. I'm fully expecting it just to start writing as ChatGPT would normally, right? But here's what it says in response. It says, sure, let's dive into this, but first let's clarify. What's the main point you want to get across? Are you aiming to highlight the value of teaching, or the idea that success isn't always measured by personal achievement? Whoa. It truly understands what I'm asking for, and it's asking me some questions. I'm like, all right, let me just keep playing along. And I say to it kind of, like how I would normally say to somebody, both, but with a greater emphasis on the latter. And now I think, okay, for sure it's going to give me a response, but it doesn't. It says, before we dive into crafting this LinkedIn post, let's clarify a few things. What's the main message you want to convey about these coaches or teachers? Are we focusing on their ability to bring out the best in others, their unique teaching methods, or something else? And how do you want this to tie back to your own experience or perspective? At this point, I'm like, oh my God, my brain hurts. DoBot is asking me too many questions, and I'm just thinking, give me the freaking answer. But I realize I haven't really thought this through that carefully, because my original prompt was loose, it was broad, and it had a big flaw built into it. And I think if you're really paying attention, you figured out what the flaw was, but I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell you online somewhere on social media. Okay. Just think about that. So this is like how I would talk to people. Maybe not as patient. Maybe I wouldn't use these exact words, but whenever someone asks me something, I don't presume to know what they're asking, or that they themselves know what they're asking for. So only in dialogue and asking more questions can we both get to a place of clarity. Because I think, I'm not sure if it was Maya Angelou who said this, there's no such thing as the right answer to the wrong question. So if it goes and answer it, it's going to send me down a wrong path. And I love that kind of interaction. So I've been sharing as much as I can live via social media on different platforms, the progress that we're making. And I got to say, it's really cool. And it's a little bit scary how good it is already. Okay. Do you want to respond to that, Sho?
Absolutely. And this is just the beginning. Just so you know, just this morning, we added the YouTube videos that you sent us as like the things that were inspiring to you, like books and different things like that. So it should be even better than before. So, and then the really, really exciting part is there's still a lot that we can do even within the platform with the data that we currently have to further optimize it and make it better. There's just tons of strategies around that. There's also one of the things that I noticed. I don't think we put your podcast data in here yet, but things like the podcast data, because it's so Q&A as we are right now, it's extremely applicable to a kind of more of a chat experience. Right now, we have a lot of business bootcamp information in there, so it actually might be really good at creating business bootcamp courses for help you through that process in the future. I'm really, really, just like yourself, I'm really, really excited to continue to see this progress. I think just like we've seen with some of the image generation stuff, you've seen how good it's become over the past year. The same thing is happening with language models. People are just, it's a little bit harder to detect, like if you're not a great writer, can you really tell the difference between an amazing writer and a legendary writer? It's becoming one of those worlds right now with AI.
Right. This is wonderful. Okay. We've gone through this. And I think what you're doing is you're providing me with a tool and resource that I'm going to be able to help a lot more people. Because like you said, if it's 2 a.m, if it's a Saturday or Sunday, I'm not really that available. Forget about the long emails or the PDFs you want to send me. I'm just not that available, and I can't be, but I do aspire or intend to help as many people as I can. It's just, there's a limit on what I can do without hurting myself in the process. So this allows me to create something that can be used by many people. It allows them to have some form of a relationship with it. And it reminds me of that film. I think it was directed by Spike Jonze. It's called Her, and it stars Joaquin Phoenix, and he falls in love with his AI, which is fairly common in this futuristic world. And back then, this felt like pure science fiction, but it was a novel concept that a person falls in love with his operating system, voiced by, what's her name? Scarlett Johansson. It's voiced by Scarlett Johansson. And of course, she has a very seductive, sexy voice, a husky, and he's talking to her and he falls in love with her as much as he would fall in love with anybody. They have phone sex, they have deep relationships, meaningful conversations. And it feels like 2023, 2024, we're going to be right there where people are going to be talking to their operating system and having relationships. And it's going to feel as real as anything you've experienced in your life. And then it calls into question, what is real? Because I don't know about you, but I've had long distance relationships before where I couldn't see the person. It was purely based on the phone. And it's not that crazy of an idea that you can actually find meaningful, personal, deep emotional connections with something that is artificial.
I completely agree. The movie Her is not, you don't look at his behavior and say, that's a crazy man. You say, that's a man that clearly lacks love in his life, but that relationship seems to work, where there's kind of like mutual benefit. It's clear. It seems, in some ways, it even seems to be healthy, in the sense that the Scarlett Johansson, the AI, was so wise that it was kind of able to guide him towards happiness. Yeah. Ironically, she leaves him.
Yes. Spoiler alert. You have to say spoiler alert first. Okay. Everybody rewind. A spoiler alert coming. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, there's a bit of a shock there. There are, certain people now that are even like building servers within their home so they can have like their own AI running at all times within their home that can't like leave or like, people are already figuring out. But I love, one of the things that has inspired me to create what we do today is some of the movies and what we've seen,
Right.
Where I can say, oh yeah, oftentimes they show what can happen in the worst case scenario, but oftentimes I can kind of see the best case scenario. One of the first movie campaigns I worked on was for the Avengers film, the first Marvel Avengers back in like 2010 or something like that. And I had to create a lot of like the graphics in 3D for Iron Man. And then to me back then, I was like, this seems possible. I'm just creating designs in After Effects and Cinema 4D stuff right now, but this seems possible. Like even without a neural network or something as complex as we have today, even the code from back then, we could probably made something happen. And then I really love that idea of being kind of like a Q, or like, Q from James Bond, where the tech guy that is able to provide like Jarvis-like technology to great domain experts and leaders like yourself. You even have the glasses, right, of the Tony Stark, like essentially, because I know in the hands of someone that can, when the AI does ask you tough questions, you're able to actually help give it direction. That's what AI is really lacking today. And then oftentimes, those questions that you talked, these are tough questions. When it comes to an enterprise or brand, and some of the bigger brands that we worked with, they're very slow to answer those questions. And so it's exciting to see how much more power people like yourself are going to have in the future, even compared to bigger brands, because of your ability to make decisions and to guide the AI and essentially give it a compass so it can run in a direction that you need it to.
So Sho, what's the business model for something like this? I know you're helping me, and eventually there's going to be some monetization model. There has to be business here, because you can't support a team of 24 people on just goodwill, right?
Yes.
So talk me through, like, if this excites somebody, where do they go with this kind of thing? And how do you see this rolling out for me and for others?
Yeah, of course. I mean, people can go to our website, SHO.ai, and we have pricing on there. Essentially, the pricing is reflective of the value that we bring to the company or the brand or the person, right? In terms of efficiencies and productivity, their ability to kind of 10x their presence using our tool. A big part of what we do, and it's kind of baked into our pricing, is this idea of like these AI live hours, where essentially you work with our team, where we work with some of your data and we help you kind of make the right decisions in terms of making the AI that's best suits you. For another brand, they don't want a DoBot, right? They want their own version, or a different expert. Maybe they're in real estate or different things like that. They want their version, and it's very different data, and they're saying different things in a very different way. And then maybe some of them, the last thing that they want is a follow-up question from their bot. It really depends. And then we're really excited if people are interested in doing something similar, where they are interested in utilizing these foundation models, but they want it like a good coworker. They want them to be onboarded onto the mission. We're the place to go.
Okay. So for me, I can, the rollout plan for us, and it's happening right now. You've been working with our team to integrate a DoBot chat presence inside of our paid walled off coaching community called the Future Pro Group. And that's going to be value add for everybody there. But the idea there is that's not the final destination. It's just a testing ground so that we can get better data, help the people that we serve already, and get really valuable feedback. Because in my future, here's what I would love to happen. I train and teach people on a one-to-one, on a one-to-few basis. But I think where I would optimize my time is to spend most of my time training DoBot to be able to tackle questions that people feel like that wasn't a very good answer or response. And so it keeps getting better models, gets better guidelines from us. And so it's going to continue to be more and more refined. So it gets to this place where it's going to handle 90% of your questions, and it's going to be good enough for you at a fraction of the cost of what it would cost to book me for an hour. For example, for context here, if you wanted to book with me for an hour, it would cost you $5,000 an hour. I don't have many takers for that at that price point. It was designed this way because I can't just keep selling my time. There's a finite amount of that. And so I want DoBot to do most of the work. But ultimately, we've seen other models like this where DoBot lives in the world, and you could pay for a number of questions or a period of time. And then there's a model there where there's revenue for both of us, where there's some kind of rev share, and we can see it paying for itself and the team and growing not only the educational presence, but growing financially for both of us, right?
Yes.
Is that where this goes, Sho?
Absolutely. We actually even have a system where if you wanted to, you can launch your own kind of the Futur Pro group completely within the platform. Mm-hmm. So we talked about the ability to create websites and different things like that. Even things like managing like your payments and your users and different things like that. These are all capabilities that we can really streamline for you. So you can focus on what's important, the story, and then manage every. I don't have to worry about like all the other technology behind the closed doors because it is a race. Let us kind of handle that. And in terms of the flexibility of the system, you're completely right. People can utilize the API to integrate it within their software. And we have tons of incredible integration tools, even things like, the system can even generate CSS and different things like that for you. Now, at the very bare minimum, right, you can just think of it as, AI trained on you and your identity or your brand. But the vehicle itself is actually pretty complex in the sense that it has 600 plus features. So imagine a ChatGPT or a Stability or these different things with 600 features that you can actually integrate this technology into your brand system, whatever that might be. And that could be Futur Pro Group, that could be your newsletters, it could be your website. And these days, these touch points are getting out of hand, but let AI help with that.
Right. And there's a couple of other phases I see it going through potentially. One is we get the language model to work so good that we're like, yeah, we're pretty convinced this is you. And all my friends and family are like, yeah, it's pretty you. It's got the same snappiness and it's asking the right questions and helping me to get clarity. And then we take it to like using synthetic voice. So now it's going to speak like me and sound like me. So if you really want to quote unquote talk to me in a natural language model versus writing things down via text prompt. And then the last one is to use potentially some deep fake version of myself where it's like, okay, this is a digital version of you. I know it's not you, but if you want to look at a face, if you want it to emote and react to you and sound like me, that would be the third phase of this. But you and I are already talking about, well, there's specific ways that I create content, the way that I write posts. And so there could be a DoBot that's trained on this foundational layer, but one that's has specific data and weights to things about how I like to create content. So if you're trying to grow your social media presence and you want to write higher engaging posts on LinkedIn, you give it some information and DoBot walks you through the process and coaches you through it versus just rewriting it for you. I think that gets really interesting. So now DoBot is a teacher or a coach and helps you to write better in terms of getting, because I'm not an English professor, in terms of getting higher engagement on your posts. And we can see it doing many different things, not just being a consultant or a therapist or whatever. So lots of applications. I'm super excited where this goes. Now, I know you prepared a couple of slides. I don't know if you want to show them, if this is the appropriate time, or if you want to finish another thought. What do you think?
Oh, sure. I would love to show the slides. Yeah, just to piggyback on what you're talking about. One of the huge things in growing the startup over the past 6 years was surrounding myself with kind of like these mentors or coaches. They're extremely, extremely valuable. One of the beautiful things about the DoBot, and then things like in the future would be that people will be able to have like a Jedi council where they'll be able to talk to like a DoBot and the Alex Hormozy bot in the same room about a problem that they're having. I'm really excited to see how this kind of scales. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And then it should be huge value to everybody. I'm going to share my screen then.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. So here, this is kind of a little bit of a framework breakdown of how the system works, right? And how we're able to essentially create DoBot. We have this beautiful platform, and this is essentially the AI data engine, where it's like the long-term memory of the AI. So it has contextual relevance to create answers that are specific to Chris or specific to our brand. We're built upon tons of different models, some to do like AI tagging of images, some obviously GPT to create text, Stability to generate images, DALL-E, etc. So you can get access to them all in one single place. But the beautiful part is you can train it from one place too, so they all kind of talk the same language. We do that by essentially filling it with the brand compliance and rule tuning layer. So this is some of the rules like the personas, or some of the feedback that Chris gives us. The data and assets. So this is like the business bootcamp or different things like that. And we also have the ability to integrate. So if you did want to integrate Google Analytics, or we have all these different blocks, these are basically senses into AI. So DoBot basically has senses into, oh, this is how the marketing website is doing and different things like that. Essentially becoming more contextually aware, giving you better answers. This is a little crazy, but essentially you see it in edit mode here. It's completely white labeled front end and back end. And essentially this is where you're able to, you have a few things here. You kind of think of them as 4 major features. The brand tune chat. So this is where you have the different personas and you can have the access to the DoBot. You have the brand style controller where you can literally just generate websites and assets. We integrate with like Figma and different things like that. So we do think about what people want. You have the AI data engine where you can edit pages, update, create sections, like sort it the way you want. We have permissions and different layers as well. And then of course the brand tune image gen. We just had a recent update, really exciting stuff. All the imagery you kind of see in the back end was all generated with the image gen. But you can also generate 10 images at a time using our system. But the important part is you can generate them using your brand colors and stuff like that. I thought this was kind of fun to show. So if you asked ChatGPT, right, about like, who are you? It really doesn't have a sense of positioning. And then so that's where prompt engineering has become really, really popular, where people are basically injecting the context into a sentence, which is, we know, not best practice if you try to do that with a human. But with the context, you essentially get the exact answer that you want, right? He even knows, the AI even knows who it's talking to, which is kind of funny. Here, I thought I'd just like break down on just a few conversations really quickly that we can talk about. Like this is just a conversation that I had with the DoBot. And then we can actually have a conversation directly, but I thought this was easier so we can actually see how it's responding. Essentially, it's asking with follow-up questions that I answer. And then these are kind of like more kind of honest, late at night, conversations that you can have with the AI.
Late at night, pouring your soul out to a computer. Yes.
Yeah. Like, just so people know, this is not a fear of mine. This is not me. Just kidding.
This is a friend of yours. You're asking for a friend.
Yeah, I'm asking for a friend. But you can kind of see that it is empathetic and it's really focusing on continuing the conversation. So I feed it more information. Eventually it has enough information where it'll give an actual kind of advice based upon everything that I've given it. But you can see it really did try to understand the scenario before it gave this advice. You can see it's like also referencing some of the books and different things like that you've included as well. This is another completely different use case, but I wanted to show it anyway. In this case, one of the things that, I would love to be able to do is ask Chris Do at 9 p.m. at night, like, hey, can you review my marketing copy on my website? And I want him to respond immediately. This is essentially what I did with the DoBot. And then essentially they're able to give me really good feedback on how I can improve the marketing language on that page. I just I paste it into it. So you can kind of see how you can get personalized advice that way. Here, I started talking a little bit about things along the lines of like limited beliefs and different things like that. You can see how we have short, quick follow-up questions where eventually the AI has clarity around the scenario and is then able to give proper advice very specific to the user. Again, we're going to continue to refine this, but this is just a few examples of how we can do things. This is another one. On this slide, we're seeing another question. Can you give me a plan that I can execute over the next 8 hours to improve my sales? Something really specific. Maybe a person has 8 hours to spend over the weekend and they just want to dig into some sales. Here, it gave kind of a plan hour by hour on how someone can kind of jump into sales and different things like that. So you can kind of see there's a lot of flexibility in how we can train the system. We can also kind of go back and say, hey, this is what's going to happen after this call. Is Chris is going to give me feedback on this writing. And he's going to say, I want it for these types of scenarios, I prefer to respond like this. And the beautiful part is we take that, we put into a platform. And then from that point on, it will respond that way, which is really exciting. I had some other slides. These are actually slides that I presented at Art Center last year. It was probably like September or something like that, before like ChatGPT came out. So this slide would have been even crazier if I had a ChatGPT on there. But kind of talks about AI is completely out of the bottle in the sense that it's progressing extremely quickly. At Sho.ai, we're kind of riding that wave, but you can see this is a wave that is exponential. These are just the amount of research papers that basically correlate really closely to AI's capabilities. And so this is a wave that you want to ride, or else it might wipe you out if you don't ride it. One of the things I like to talk about too at that Art Center presentation was just, hey, like where does that kind of leave us? And then the reason why we created the platform was because we really, really know that AI needs human input. And humans are really good at collecting insight, positioning, to ask questions in the field, and to see things that can feed the AI to make the brand or presence more competitive. This is a funny, I was curious what your thoughts were on this slide, Chris, in terms of copying or stealing. There's a lot of, for the image creation models right now, there's a lot of controversy around this in terms of open data sets and how AI is using patterns and its understanding of the world to create new imagery. My general understanding is that like it's kind of like the Apple, the Google with the search engine, you know, with Yahoo was the first ones with the search engines, but they copied it, remixed, and made it their own. They kind of applied their own ingredients. But I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on what you think about AI and the image generation stuff right now in terms of like even copyright or ethics.
Yeah, AI ethics is a tricky one. It's probably one that's too meaty for us to like fully cover, but I'll give you my high level opinion on this, okay? I recently spoke to a professor who's like the department chair of the master's program in one of this prestigious design schools. And he's like, I did the deep dive. AI is not doing anything different than what humans do. It's just called looking. And you look and then you make it your own. And a lot of people, I don't think they understand this. The way that AI is trained on copyrighted images is before it processes or looks at the image, it's been diffused. That's why it's called stable diffusion. It blurs the image and then it kind of starts to squint its eyes, if you will, and makes out certain patterns. And in the very beginning, eyes and hands and certain parts look really weird because they're still learning, like a child seeing the world for the first time. A lot of people who don't understand how AI works, because it looks so good, it literally thinks it lifts a part of something and puts it into the other thing like you would a photo bash, right? So it's not actually using the pixels. It's an approximation. It's understanding of it. And maybe I have this wrong, but if humans look at work, and we're all looking at work all the time, quite literally, you're looking for inspiration and you're processing lots of things and you're doing the deep look. And then you go back and you create some things. What are you looking for? And why would you look at it if not in some way to borrow elements, assets, or that spark? And because you don't know how to explain your process and you can do it fairly slowly, you forgive yourself. You give yourself a pass that it's not copying, but you are, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's two kinds of copyright that are infringement that really bother me. One is the blatant lifting of assets and images that don't belong to you and you use without paying for nor crediting the person who did it. And that kind of copying is unforgivable or should come at a heavy cost. But if you look at a poster from Saul Bass and you like the graphic quality of it and the way that he renders images in a very simplistic form, and you go out and do something that's very graphic and renders something in a very simplistic form, I don't believe you're turning yourself into the authorities. If you use colors inspired by somebody, you're not turning yourself in. Nobody is. But because what's happening is non-artists, non-quote unquote creative people are using tools like this and doing work at scale that rival your technical skill, it's a very threatening gesture. And I can see why people are really concerned. But this is not for me to decide. It'll be for the courts to figure out. But the word of caution I would throw out to everybody is don't wait for the courts to figure this out. You need to be playing with the tools, integrating some of these things into your workflow, and you draw the line for yourself, but don't artificially handicap yourself. It's like to say you want to do photo retouching, but you're not going to use any software to do it. You don't want to use Photoshop. You don't want to use Illustrator. You don't want to use any 3D image making program because you want to do it the old way. You want to build real models in real life and you want to light things. And that's how people used to do it. You're putting yourself at a distinct disadvantage. That's my take on it. Sho, what's yours?
Oh, beautifully said, Chris. No, that's absolutely my take. And then how you described how the AI actually thinks through this imagery. In many ways, it actually, I think people that actually use it kind of understand that it reflects our process too. And then by utilizing the tool, we actually do realize, oh, I am getting better. This is a craft like anything else. And then my expertise, my knowledge does translate. So I'm really excited to hear that you kind of have a similar view on how to approach this. I thought this was an interesting slide as well. So this is from our image generator. This was just a really simple prompt of a turtle. This was June last year. You see it's like a cartoon, like child image, right? You see in November 22, okay, starting to get really good. Now this year, you're getting just incredible imagery. So this is one of the things when we talk about progress, it's even with the language models are going through the same level of progress. It's easier to see with imagery. I also want to talk about fine-tune imagery. This is something that we wanted to do with you, Chris. We actually, we tried using some of your imagery to create a fine-tune model. We just had to get more of it, just some higher quality imagery, but we'll be able to create some really cool things. But this is kind of where we see like the future of our platform and what we're doing is just the continuous like customization of these tools and then making sure that we're getting the most out of these models. And if that means fine tuning it, awesome. If that means that we have to create a playbook that an AI can read and understand so it can follow guidelines, that's what we build as well. That's the end of the slides.
Okay.
And so we can talk about other things. I'd be happy to show it. We can show the platform live too.
I think we can probably tease them maybe with one quick example of how DoBot works. And so we need to start it with a really good question, something that somebody is really thinking about. Do you have something ready to go, Sho?
Yeah, so we were able to add the books and some of the video references to TED Talks and different things like that. It's worth definitely. We talked about podcasts as well, and I think that would make a huge difference, to be honest with you, because right now the business bootcamp material outweighs more Q&A type information, and so the AI will have a tendency to kind of just say, "Oh, most likely this is business bootcamp course material that I need to create." So I'm really excited to see where the podcast takes us to a completely different level, but this should significantly outperform Tuesday.
Okay.
Already.
Let's try something. You know what? I have a prompt for you to think about. Okay. Oftentimes I want to write a talk or I want to do a workshop and I need help in formulating the title, the description, and a course outline and designing some exercises. I don't want a total failure here. So let's pick something that you think you can excel at given some of the prompts or the ideas I've just shared with you.
Oh, in terms of like creating courses and things like that?
I want to write a talk or I want to teach a course and I need to come up with a title, the outline, the hook, whatever it is, and perhaps some of the exercises. You don't have to do all of that. I just want you to pick something in that general space because this is something I do all the time. So you type and I'll narrate for you so that you don't have to walk and chew gum at the same time. Okay. So Sho's typing into the interface because it begins with, "Hey, I'm here to help. What's on your mind?" Sho's typing in. What are you typing in?
I need help writing a talk on generative AI. Should we do publishers or should we do for motion agencies?
Pick whatever
should
you
we
want.
do for motion? Okay.
Whatever.
For motion agencies.
So now DoBot responds, "Absolutely, Sho. Let's start by getting a clear understanding of your audience. Who will be attending this talk? Are they familiar with generative AI? Or is this a new concept for them? Understanding your audience will help us tailor the talk to their needs and knowledge level."
All right. So I wrote people in the motion industry, typically agency owners. They're familiar, but haven't actually applied AI into their process. Sorry about the grammar, everybody.
What's great about robots is they kind of figure out the context anyway. So your grammar doesn't have to be perfect. Your spelling can be off. You can misquote somebody. It kind of already knows because it has a lot of context within the larger framework of its data set. All right. So now it says, "Great. Sounds like your audience has a basic understanding of AI, but they haven't yet integrated it into their workflows. When crafting your talk, consider focusing on the following points." Now, I'm not going to read everything because it's too much. What is generative AI? The potential of AI in motion graphics, real world examples, how to implement AI, addressing concerns. That sounds like a pretty good framework so far. Now, what are you going to do?
does it give you a good starting point for your talk? And I say, yes, that is great. Can you help me write the script? It's really writing the whole thing out here right now. Sorry about that.
Well, you asked it to, so here we go.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, let's scroll back to the top.
Yes.
And I'll read the AI's response here. It says, basically, I'd help you to craft your script for your talk. And here's a rough outline. There's an introduction. Start with a brief personal introduction and your connection to this topic. Share a startling fact, a short story, or a provocative question about generative AI to grab the audience's attention. State the purpose of your talk to explore the potential generative AI in the motion industry. And then that goes with the body and the conclusion. It gives sub or bullet points to each one of the main things. So it follows a very classic structure. If you've never given a talk before, this is actually quite excellent. This is things that I talk to people about all the time. And so where do we go with this now?
So does this structure work for you? If so, we can start filling in each section with more detail.
Wow.
So should we go ahead and
say yes and let's go. Proceed.
Yes, let's go.
It's describing the title. It's also telling you what each slide has. And so we'll see if this is actually any good. So I can now read this since Sho made this bigger. It says, okay, let's dive in. The title of this talk is called Embracing the AI Revolution, the New Era for Motion Agencies. Not a bad title. And slide 1. Good evening, everyone. I'm here today to talk about a topic that's been making waves in our industry, generative AI. Now, I know what you're thinking. AI, that's for tech giants and data scientists, right? What does it have to do with us, the creatives, the storytellers? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. AI isn't just about crunching numbers and automating tasks. It's about augmenting our creative capabilities, pushing the boundaries of what we can imagine and achieve. So slide 4. Generative AI in particular is a game changer. It's a type of AI that can create content from images to music to text, and yes, even motion graphics. Slide 5. Imagine having an AI assistant that can generate hundreds of design variations in the time it takes you to make a cup of coffee. Whoa. Or an AI that can animate complex scenes with just a few simple commands. Slide 6. But it's not just about speed and efficiency. It's about exploration and innovation. With AI, we can explore design spaces that would be impossible for a human to navigate alone. We can discover new aesthetics, new narratives, new ways of engaging our audience. Now, I'm not going to read the rest. But again, if you were a novice speechwriter and you didn't know how to give a keynote on this stuff, this is not bad at all.
Yes. And then if you want another one, you can just click refresh and then it'll give you another draft. It's that simple. So the iteration process is really fun. And then you can go back in and say, hey, use this quote from this person, or use this video script or something like that to influence the script.
Yeah. Okay.
It's quite fun. Yeah.
All right. While that's still crunching through and writing Sho's next talk, I think this is a good opportunity for us to kind of split away from this, end this part of it, and kind of land this AI plane, if you will, via Midjourney or some other video-based AI generative tool. Okay, Sho, how do we end this conversation? What do we want people to know about you and what you're doing, and how they can possibly interact with you post this discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anybody is interested in training AI, we've been spending the last 6 years essentially training it on different brands and different individuals to behave the way that they want and to really help them get more things done. If you're interested in signing up, you can go to our website, www.SHO.ai, where you can learn more about us and get started. But we're really here to kind of handhold you through the process of building your best AI, so you don't have to worry about mitigating any kind of risk or other things associated with it. Now, we have a beautiful platform and a piece of software that we're the first generative AI platform in the world. And we can't wait to see what people like Chris and yourself can do with it. It's exciting times. Wonderful. So if you can be curious long enough to explore these tools, I think you're going to be as excited as I am. And I want to end it on this reflection. I was at a conference in Newcastle and I was hanging out with Mr. Daniel Priestley. And of course, the question came up is like, how do you think AI is going to impact our industry? And I believe there were a bunch of marketers in the room. And he says, without a doubt, and he says very confidently, AI is going to be the source of generating billions of new money for people who embrace it.
He says, the only problem is this money's not going to be distributed evenly. You need to think about that, everybody. So when we flash forward to the future, a few years from now, we look back at all the new millionaires and billionaires who've incorporated or developed tools for, or in somehow have added layers to the tools that we already use today. Are you going to count yourself amongst one of them or on the other side of that financial equation? I'm not here to tell you to be scared or to be afraid, but I'm here to encourage you, hopefully inspire you, and to open your minds a little bit about what you can do if you just stay curious. With that, I think this is a perfect ending to this conversation about AI. Sho, thanks for doing this. Thanks for inspiring me personally on my own journey into Midjourney, and what I think will be one of the most powerful tools that you're creating for us, which is to be able to scale my time, my knowledge across multiple platforms and to make it more accessible. I can't wait for this version to be out there in the wild and working, but also developing different models and training different things for all the needs that I need as an educator. Thanks very much, Sho.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate you and really looking forward to embracing the future with you.